Michael talked a little bit about the coastal impacts that we've already seen from climate change and that we will continue to see. But I am at heart a river person, and I wanted to talk just a little bit about what we are already seeing on the inland side of this state, which is just a tiny bit of what we're seeing worldwide on the inland side. But as we get these more intense rains, we're seeing property damage, we see the increased heat in our urban areas. And I just thought I'd turn back the clock and tell the story of the March 2010 floods that had a really significant impact on some of our inland communities. And as I said to somebody earlier today, there's really nothing in Rhode Island that's inland. We're really a coastal state. But the March 2010 floods certainly left an impact on me. So to set up the weather for that time, we basically had 3 successive big rainstorms that hit Rhode Island within several days. And the cumulative impact of all that rain was over 16 inches of rain in a small time frame. And as you know, rivers, the water is collected in the upper watershed, it starts flowing down the river, and the rivers throughout Rhode Island flooded at levels that had never been seen before. The Patuxent River just south of here, where the Warwick and Rhode Island malls are, flooded 20 feet higher than flood stage, about 5 or 6 feet higher than it had ever flooded before. That's a huge amount of water. You can hardly imagine sitting in your home and seeing a wall of water to that extent coming by. When the floods were all over, there were huge economic impacts from the floods. $200 million worth of damage from those floods. We saw utility stations closed. We had over 10,000 households that lost their power for days on end. And you may remember that I-95, the major road that we all use to get to work and that is also used for commerce up and down the East Coast, was shut down for days. And the biggest impact from the floods was felt in Warwick, Cranston, West Warwick, and Coventry. And the biggest impact in those towns was right along the rivers, where often some of the poorer communities are in those towns. I often think about the Warwick wastewater treatment plant. I've actually, water quality is my specialty. Studying wastewater treatment plants was something I did for a long time. That treatment plant, the people sat there and they watched the river begin to rise over the course of these rainstorms until it overtopped the berm that's around the wastewater treatment plant. It just filled the whole bowl that the wastewater treatment plant sits in. At that point, the wastewater treatment plant, of course, stopped working. The water just became sewage, contaminated water all around the wastewater treatment plant, overflowing into all the communities around there, into the homes. The homes were flooded with sewage-contaminated water. They were left, once the water receded, with mold and health concerns because of that contamination. The mall also flooded, and I can't wait. Greg Garrett's going to talk later on, and of course we would prefer not to have malls everywhere. But when you think about the people who actually had their jobs there at the mall was closed for months on end, and those people lost their jobs and were unable to work during that time while the mall was being rebuilt. There is a quote from the AP describing what it was like at the Warwick Mall. Water flowed like a torrent around the Warwick Mall, with rapids approaching the front doors of a Macy's and an Old Navy store and putting a movie theater underwater. Cars were submerged to their roofs. Oil slicks floated on top of muddy water through neighborhoods. In West Warwick, there was 10 feet of water along the river there. All the businesses flooded, and according to Brent Presley, the town manager there in West Warwick, those impacts remain today. A lot of those businesses haven't been able to get back on their feet. So that's the story of what's going to be happening inland. I think the good news, it's nice to leave on a little bit of a hopeful note. Communities all around the state, including West Warwick, are working hard to create stormwater utilities that will provide funding for softening all the hard surfaces, getting green spaces, green infrastructure in place in our urban areas that will help absorb some of these heavy rains that are ahead and actually leave us with a lot more lovely urban areas in the future. So, thank you very much.